Welcome to Soros's classes, and in this video we are still talking about the essay section of the English General Paper of 2019. Now this is the second topic that we were talking about, which is the responsibility of news media in India. So as I already discussed in the previous essay, there should be an introductory part to the essay. In the intro part, we can write about the role of the media, what does the media in our country, the print media and the press media, and now the print media, the television media, and now the internet media, which has gained a lot of popularity in our country. What do they mean, what their roles are, and we can write about certain technical matters, certain historical matters in this country, in this regard. For example, when we are talking about the introduction, we can write about how the print media was the most popular form of media for a long time in the country, even after the post-independence era, and then slowly after the post-independence era, as television gained popularity, television media emerged and they became the most popular, and now there's the internet media. And there are a lot of channels like News Laundry and the Quint and the Wire who cater to this whole community of internet media, and they're doing a great job in this sphere. But the television media, I guess, is still the most popular form of media. And in the introductory part, we can also write about how the media is, the journalism is popularly considered and often addressed as the fourth pillar of democracy, and how therefore they play a very important role in safeguarding the democratic spirit of this country. The second point would be the role of media, ideological role of media. How should the role of media, as I already said, safeguard the democratic spirit of this country? The media, which is often addressed as the fourth pillar of democracy, should argue in favor of public interest. They should try to safeguard public interest and be ready to criticize the government when it's required. They should be ready to talk about all the government policies, all the all the actions that the government takes in our country, whether they're beneficial for the people of our country, whether they're not beneficial, whether they're harming, or whether they're actually harming a particular section of the society while benefiting another particular section of the society, and therefore creating a discrimination, creating a divide among the people of our country. All these issues are to be addressed, and the media, that is where the role of media steps in. They are the ones who are supposed to educate the people of our country about all these matters. Now, India, as we know, is the largest democracy in the world, and democracy can successfully run only as long as people from all states of the society, every individual basically in the society, actively participates in the working, in the functioning of its government, because people of the country are the ones who form the government, and therefore they can and that can be done only when they are educated enough, they are properly and correctly educated about all the government policies, about the functioning of the government, about how the two-tier government which our country has exactly work, and what are the conditions of selecting a leader for our country, for our community, what should their responsibilities be, what does their position entail. All of these matters are to be discussed, and all these informations are provided to the people by the media. So that's where the most basic as well as most important role of the media comes in, which is educating the people of the country about their own rights and duties, and their own and their surrounding, their society basically. That would lead to the second part of the essay, which is the role of media, which is not being played justly. As we know that in our country, I mean, you can of course not include this or write the contrary point that the media is actually playing a very good role in our country, but of course you have to obviously give you have to make proper arguments and give examples. I would say that it's not being justly played, the role of the media is not being justly played in our country country, especially by the print and the television media, because they often just applaud the government for their policies and for its policies and its actions. I mean, of course, the media is allowed to applaud the government and support it in its actions if they think that they are taking the correct action, making the correct actions in the country, but it should also be ready to criticize the government whenever that's required. And of course, we know that in the recent years, the government has provided us enough opportunities to criticize it, but the media seldom does so. So that's how we know that the role of media is not being paid justly, and they're very often they're just termed as the puppets of the government, or puppets of capitalist powers, because that's how they have presented themselves. They have hardly criticized the government or criticized the government policies or spoke against tyrannical actions that the government has taken, and discriminated against the weaker sections of the society who are anyway being oppressed by the government policies. So that should not be done. A very fresh example in this regard would be the farm bills, the new farm bills that the government has introduced into the parliament, and a law has been made out of it. But as we know that the farmers of Punjab and Haryana are vehemently opposing it, and they're protesting against it for quite a few months now, and there's a lot of debate that has been triggered by this matter. And of course, I mean, that's the beauty of democracy, where people are allowed to have all kinds of opinions. They're allowed to, they should have different opinions, and yet there should be unity. But in recent years, we have seen that there have been a lot of violence whenever there's an opposition to a government policy, and these violence, these tyrannical steps that the government take against people whenever they oppose a government policy should be criticized, should be honestly opposed by the media as well to safeguard public interest, but that is seldom done. So I would say that and you can of course elaborate on this point as much as you want, so that you can make your case stronger. So I would say that the media is not playing its role justly, and then comes the point of media ownership. And of course, remember to interconnect your points. I mean, I have given this arrow to indicate that all the points should lead to its succeeding point. I mean, the points should not seem like you just placed them out of the blue, or they're just haphazard, that they haphazardly struck you, haphazardly came to your mind, and you just placed them out of the blue in your essay. They should not seem like that. All your points should seem interconnected and interrelated, and one point should lead to another. So while the role of the media leads to the role of the media not being played justly, this point should lead to the next point, which is media ownership. So when we are talking about why the role of the media is not being played justly, we can talk about how the media is mostly owned by capitalist powers in this country. As we know, a lot of news channels and the print media as well is owned by the ABP group, or the Z group, or the Star franchisee. And that's how, I mean, of course, if the media is being owned by the capitalists, they will safeguard the interests of their capitalist owners, and in that way, in that process, lose their freedom as well as their integrity. So that's how media ownership influences the kind of reporting, the kind of journalism that a particular channel or a particular media house makes, because they will have to safeguard the interests of their owners as well, who are funding them. Next comes the point of some high points of media. So of course, when you're writing about the role of media, you cannot always keep criticizing it. That will just make your essay monodirectional, and that the spirit of your critical edge will be lost. So write about some of the high points of the media as well, because Indian media, as we know, has also been effective in many cases. For example, certain scams like the Commonwealth Games scams, or the other housing society scam were exposed by the media. The Beaufort scam was exposed by the media, and even now we know that the Rafale deal, which is made by the government, has a lot of discrepancies, and the media keeps talking about them. So all these scams and these discrepancies about financial matters are often talked about by the media, and in the past we have seen that the media has honestly worked upon a lot of scams, and they have been exposed. The people who were guilty were exposed, and they had to pay for it. So high points of media include some of the examples that when media were really effectively worked with a lot of efficiency to expose the wrongdoers in this country. As well as you can talk, when you're talking about the high points of media, you can talk about how media is educative, how in case of print media, the editorial pages often work to educate people, to inform people about the functioning of the government, about the various oppressions that happen in the various stratas of our society that are not often visible visible to our naked eyes. And that's how media can be informative. Media, through their arguments, show us what we usually tend to ignore. And finally, there should be the conclusion, in which you sum up all the other points and talk about you talk about the ideological role of the media in our country, how they can be helpful to the people, how they are, what kind of roles they should be playing, what sort of potential role you think they should be playing. If you think that there's a particular discrimination, there's a particular kind of discrimination going on in our country, if you think that a particular issue must be covered by the media but it's not being covered by them sufficiently, then you can include all those points in the conclusion and then just end your essay over there. Be sure to interconnect your points and make them seem like one of them is leading to the other. They should not seem haphazard or scattered. They should there should be a coherency in the points that you make, and which will finally lead to the conclusion. The next topic would be, there are 3 other topics in this section. Third one is free speech as a democratic right, hazards of pollution, and possible solutions. And the last one is representation of women in Indian cinema. So let's just move on to the last one and discuss this, representation of women in Indian cinema. Okay, just erase this off. So for this topic, again, start with the introduction. How do you think women have been represented in Indian cinema? And start, it would be a nice idea to start from the very beginning of Indian cinema, very advent of Indian cinema, which would be around in the 1930s, late 1920s and 1930s. When the silent film first emerged, and then there was voice as well, and that was the pre-independence era. And who were some of the women who were acting in cinemas? Of course, there were no other field that they were acting in, no other profession that they were engaged in as regard to cinema. There were no female directors or producers at the time. So they were just actresses, and some of them were Devika Rani, and I cannot think of Devika Rani at this point of time. So there were certain movies like the Chut Kanya, Nirmala, Throw of the Dice. Some of these movies, and these movies were, most movies actually in the pre-independence India dealt with social issues, communal issues, and how communal harmony was important. The various communities in India were living together, and then the foreign powers that traded into the country, disrupted that, and they were causing disruption. There were also, because there was a new society that was emerging in the 1920s and 30s, a new democratic society. India was soon to gain independence, and social balance had to be achieved. So the leaders of our freedom struggle were preaching in favor of social balance, of equality among people. So the socialist spirit, the socialist fervor was earnestly argued in favor of in the Indian cinema, and the actresses who were acting in Indian cinema at that point of time also represented the favor of social spirit, social democracy through their characters. But then, as we move on to the post-independent era, we can see that the role of women drastically change, and they are reduced into furniture roles. So, role of women be reduced after So in the post-independence era, we can see that the role of women in the cinema just get reduced, and there are mostly male-centric movies where there's a hero who can do superhuman stuff, or who is extremely stylish and handsome, and he is and the stories also change. The stories, the kind of stories that we see in the post-independence era, especially as we move towards 1970s and 80s, the kind of stories absolutely change, and the role of women are also reduced. And there were, of course, an abundance of actresses at the point of time, a lot more than there used to be in the pre-independence era. A lot of women come forward and they start acting, they also start singing. They were excellent singers and dancers who were acting in the movie as well. But the role, the impact of their role is reduced, and we can see that they're mostly reduced into roles of romantic interest of the male protagonist of the movie, and they represent morally upright women, chaste women who are basically the epitome of goodness. Or so there's a binary created between the kinds of women